Hey, what's up YouTube? So I'm trying to make a little short video here to kind of clarify some things on how to accurately read your measurements and try to figure out how long it's going to take to run a load off of an inverter and your batteries. Okay, so on another video on my channel that I explain amp hours and their true ratings and meanings and whatnot, subscriber over there has a new setup and they're trying to figure out how to do things, and what they were using was a kilowatt meter. Now there's nothing wrong with a kilowatt meter. Kilowatt meter is going to be a lot more accurate than this. You can see with everything off, you know, it's skewed already. You know, they're showing 0.18 amps and there's nothing happening, and there's no way to zero that, just something you got to deal with. So kilowatt meter is great, but that's not going to tell you how much load is on your batteries. I tried to explain this a little bit, but I'm not sure if they were understanding, so I figured I'd just make a video. So I know there's online conversion calculators and all this stuff, and there's, you know, rules and mathematical equations, and basically you can safely say it like this: every 100 watts at 120 volts AC is equal to 1 amp. So to produce that 1 amp at, you know, whatever you want to call it, 110, 115, 120 volts AC, it's all the same. That extra 10 volts plus or minus ain't really going to matter. We're talking about the amperage here. So to produce that from 12 volts DC, according to the math, it's going to take 8.33 amps. But that doesn't include how inefficient your inverter is. So the way I kind of judge things is I just round it on up. I just round it on up to even 10 amps. And there you go. So for every 1 amp AC, you're going to be pulling 10 amps DC. So now I got a load that's pretty close here. I think this is about a 125 watt light bulb. Somewhere in there, 125, 135 watt. So we'll see. Watch, I'm going to flip it on and we'll see what the amperage draw goes up to. Whoo! So we're leveled off. All right, 1.5 amps. Then we got to subtract 0.18. Might as well say 0.2. Okay, so 0.2 amps. The meter's off. So we're talking, you know, 1.3 amps or so. So that should be pretty close to the 10 amp mark. Okay, so let's see what we got. Alright, so we'll flip the meter to DC. Now I can zero the DC. I wish I could zero the AC, but so we're pretty close there. Alright, see what we got going in. Look at that, 16 amps. So even that just goes to show right there that the mathematical equations are not right. And actually this is kind of a surprise to me too, because then that means this is closer to a 2 amp load. So possibly the amp meter is not reading correctly at all. Not even close. Okay. This might be, seems like closer to a 200 watt light bulb. You see, we're going back right where we were. Okay. But this just proves my point all the better, is that you cannot trust what the numbers are. If this bulb was labeled 125 watt light bulb, you're going to do the calculations and assume that you're going to be pulling maybe 10 to 12 amps. And clearly, we can see that we're pulling closer to 16 amps, a little over 16. Same reading again, 16.5 amps. Okay? So this is why I tell people you're better off just getting the equipment to just take the measurements. But this is the main point I wanted to show. So we got about 1.5 amps AC. Then you put in the inefficiency of the generator, sorry, keep calling it a generator, inefficiencies of the inverter. Now we're pulling, you know, almost 16.5 amps DC. So I haven't showed this battery bank yet. I'm going to do a video on it later, but I've upgraded my setup to AGM batteries, which is way better. If you guys remember from my last videos when I tested these banks, it was 69 amp hours capacity. Those were with the interstate batteries. These are still interstate batteries, but they're AGMs. They're actually smaller, they're less weight, and they were rated for 100 amp hours, I believe. But remember from my last video, that's not usable amp hours. So out of my last setup that was 200 amp hours, I only had 69 amp hours. Same 200 amp hour setup, but this is AGM. I've got 129 amp hours now. I've got pretty much double. Close enough to double for me. So, now that we have the actual measurements of what's being consumed by this AC load, I can do the math. So you take 129 amp hours divided by, just make it easy and call it 17 amps, and that'll tell you exactly how long that load is going to take, and it'll run before this inverter shuts down at 10.6 volts. So I hope that clears up some things for you. You can't do your amp hour measurements from the output of the inverter. You got to do it from the input. You got to see what's going in, what's actually coming out of these batteries is what matters. And as you can see, this inverter here is pretty inefficient, because according to the math, at 8.33 amps per 1 amp AC, this is pulling an equivalent of a 2 amp load or 200 watt load. But as we can see from the reading, knowing that it's off, okay, it's creeping up. It kind of stabled out at 1.8 last time. So as we can see from the reading, all right. Oh, come on, hard to do one-handed. Come on, there we go. So again, levels out at 1.55 this time. So you minus 0.2 amps. I think we could safely assume that this is either a 125 watt or 135 watt bulb. I don't know what it is. It's really old, super old. But you can see a 1 1/4, we'll just say 1 1/4 amp load is pulling the equivalent of a 2 amp load if I had a good efficient inverter. So I hope that explains everything a little bit, kind of clears things up. If it doesn't, hit me up with some more questions in the comments. I'll do my best to try to explain it for you.